Okay, let's talk about two things that are really important to most people: politics and religion, and even people that aren't particularly religious. They're maybe it's important to them because they want to um, avoid religious people telling them how to live their lives, right? So these are things that typically you think you pick, right? You pick your religion, you pick and you pick your political beliefs. Those are things that are under your free will choice. But if you look at this, you look at a map of the world. So here's the world's religions. This one's a little more particular. I like this one because it kind of gives you more of the broad brush. So interesting thing here. You look at places where Christianity is a dominant religion, right? So you look at Western Europe, right? Largely Christian, although it's changing with immigration from North Africa. But you look at the purple is Christianity. So Western Europe, where Christianity sort of flowered after the Roman Empire fell apart. It was transplanted from Israel and Palestine over into Western Europe. It was spread through the Roman Empire, got sort of out here into Eastern Europe, and then and so you have Christianity here, and then of course colonists from primarily from England came over to the U.S. And then later on, you had waves of immigrants from Western and Eastern Europe, also Christians. You have the Spaniards coming down to South America and colonizing it and taking it over. So lo and behold, the whole mass of North America is mostly Christians. And what's that?
What a shock.
Yeah, it's surprising, right? And then also you had colonization of Africa by the British Empire and also by other European countries, mostly Britain, I think, down here in sub-Saharan Africa. And surprise, surprise, lots of Christians down there. You look at Islam that started from Saudi Arabia. Oops. Stupid mouse. I think people leave this out of the cradle. I don't have my key with me either. Oh, there we go. It's unstuck. So it started out from, let's see if I make this bigger. Started out from Saudi Arabia and moved over into Turkey and the satellite republics of the former Soviet Union. And then moved over into North Africa and spread there, and that's pretty much where it stopped. So, and then came over to Europe, got into Europe, and then got beaten back. So this is pretty much where, and then also down into Indonesia, which is actually the most populous of Islamic countries. So all this is a result of wars of conquest and migration patterns, right? You had Buddhism that started. First of all, look at India, the continent of India, where Hinduism started, right? That's the orange. Wow, look, it's all Hindu through and through. There's a few Muslims down there, and then this is the orange is.
What's the difference between the stripe?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think the yellow is Buddhism. As Buddhism and Hinduism, right? So you see in India and in Southeast Asia, it's Buddhism and Hinduism. Now, here's a question. Why aren't there big orange stripes going through here? Here you do get some, this is the folk religions, I think. So this is like indigenous stuff from the Inuit or something up way far north here. But why is this almost pretty much purple through and through, and why is this all orange and orange and yellow stripe? Why Hinduism in India and Hinduism and Buddhism in Southeast Asia, and why is Japan almost all Buddhist, and why is it that the Middle East is all Islamic? Is it people making free will decisions about what religion they're going to believe in? No, it's the culture. It's the influence of culture. And people that have a religion in these areas, they tend to pick the religion dominant in the culture. And especially when you get in culturally homogeneous places where you don't have a lot of outside communication with the outside world in developing countries, without internet, without everybody having a cell phone. You're even more isolated, more likely to pick up the cultural beliefs of everybody else, including your religion. So where's the free will choice? And this is a particular problem with Christianity when you say that everybody has a free will choice to accept or reject Jesus to determine their eternal destiny. And you look at some schmo over in like rural China who has some missionary tell him the gospel of Jesus, and he's like, oh, that's some weird foreign religion. I'm worshiping the ancestors. That's what my deal is. Is that really a free will choice? So, thoughts of this? Doesn't this throw a monkey wrench in this idea that if you can't pick your religion, your politics, what are you left with? You're picking what color socks you're going to wear today. And the religion and culture goes with a lot of other beliefs too, like how many wives you can have and whether homosexuality is okay, all those things. Yeah.
I think it's constructivist, so society tells us how much we choose about ourselves. And you're making a joke about it, like what kind of socks we're wearing. Yeah, day-to-day stuff. Really, that's all we kind of. You can vote for your representative elected, he can represent you in government. That's about it. Day-to-day stuff, and I guess voting if you're in the correct country. So I don't know. It seems like. How do I phrase this? It seems like we have the ability to choose our religion and choose our beliefs, but society kind of indicates that we should choose a certain one.
Mm-hmm. So you're making the argument that culture and society kind of push us in one direction, but maybe certain strong individuals can throw off the shackles of conformity and make a free choice.
Yeah, in a sense, yeah. I don't know if it's strong individuals, but rather just people that are determined to be a certain set of ideas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like I kind of just walked in randomly, but I feel like
Go ahead.
parents have more control over religion. I don't know, sorry, I feel like I'm kind of lost.
No, that's all right.
Crap in there, but from what I heard, personally, I feel like not as much culture and society, maybe, I guess, but I feel like parents and peers and family members have more of an influence just because they're teaching you, and if they want to teach you their way, you're probably going to learn and grow up and think that way too, but I don't know. Never mind.
Well, no, you make a good point that people who are raised in a religion, they see it as being normative. That's what their family believes. They're raised to be a Christian or a Buddhist or what have you, and that's.
My parents were atheists, so I grew up non-atheist. But if it was culture or society that had raised me, I probably would have been Christian.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents influenced me. Am I making sense?
No, you are. Yeah, I have a friend like that. He was, his parents were from Eastern Europe, and they're atheists, and he was raised to think that believing in God is he was told it was like Santa Claus for adults, and that and his parents said, well, usually you grow up and you realize there's not a Santa Claus, but some people just haven't figured it out yet, and that's what we call Christians. So and just really, they're laid on pretty thick of religion is this foolishness. It's what the government uses to control you, and it's for old women and ignoramuses, and not for a thinking intelligent person. so he sees that's his view of religion based on his early experiences with family. Yeah.
It's also not displayed as a choice in a lot of cultures. It's just a way of life, or if you don't believe this, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, that's true.
Situation.
There's some of that, particularly with Islam, which is a rather authoritarian religion, which is often melded with state control. And in the Middle Ages, you had that certainly with Christianity being imposed on people, and including conquered territories. and contrary to the teachings of Jesus, I might add. But you have, so there's that, but there's also, like, even in these areas where you have the religious police and you have this sort of authoritarian control and religion being forced on people and forced conversion, and if you leave the religion, you'll be killed. There's still, even in those societies, I think the majority of people, they're going along with it because they really believe it's true, not because they're being forced to believe it. And then, again, you ask the question, like, if it's all free will, if everybody's making these free will choices every day, why is it that religions tend to cluster in these areas? Like Islam, North Africa and the Middle East, Christianity, Western Europe, the United States, Hinduism, India, Buddhism, Southeast Asia, right, and Japan. And these are all represent, like, Buddhism migrated out of India and took a root in Asia, and that's where it sort of flowered and took off. And so that's, and Australia, right, it's a colony, originally a colony of Britain. So it's and then the I'm not sure what this no religion thing is here.
I'm pretty sure that's the desert.
Is it nobody lives there, right?
Only on the very edges of the continent.
Yeah. Same thing with up here, like up in the big swatch of the Soviet Union, I have lots of people living. Yeah, so there's religion, and it makes you think, well, how much choice do I really have over my religion? And there's studies that show, like, the parents' religion and the kids' religion, and there's like a lot, not always, but a great amount of the time, 60, 70, 80% of the time, that the kids follow in the footsteps of the parents as far as what their religion is. Less so in the United States and in some other places. So here's a thing on politics. Here's a study. If this is from the Smithsonian, and they're looking at people's brains and trying to figure out trying to predict their political beliefs. If you want to know people's politics, study their parents. In fact, party affiliation of someone's parents can predict the child's political leanings about 70% of the time. About around 70% of the time. Looks like there's a typo in this article. How embarrassing for the Smithsonian. Sometimes the standards of websites is a little below the print edition. But new research published yesterday suggests what mom and dad think isn't the end game in shaping a political identity, that these differences reflect distinct neural processes, and they can predict who's left of center or right of center with 82.9% accuracy, outperforming your parents. So if we know what your parents' political beliefs are, we can predict your political beliefs 70% of the time. But if we do a scan of your brain, we can predict it 82.9% of the time. So again, where's the free will decision, right? It turns out, according to this article, that it's a product of your neurophysiology. So it's kind of, and the idea that your beliefs, whether you're like a Republican or Democrat or independent, it has to do with I'll just give you some details here. It has to do with your fear processing in the amygdala. So here's what it says. Liberals tend to seek out novelty and uncertainty, while conservatives exhibit strong changes in attitude to threatening situations. Liberals are more willing to accept risk, while conservatives have intense physical reactions to threatening stimuli. I'm not sure about that. If you went to Vegas, you won't be able to tell who's a Democrat or Republican. But the fact that being a Republican changes how your brain processes risk and gambling is really fascinating, says one of the researchers. So anyway, this is just scientists who are getting pretty good at figuring out, like, why people support certain parties, have certain political beliefs, and it looks like some of this might be hardwired in your brain. So again, like, here's one thing that says it's the influence of your parents, and you can so there's culture, there's your parents, and then there's like your brain, like what you inherit from your parents. So again, any thoughts of free will choice? Yeah.
I just kind of think it sucks that you grow up in an environment where your parents like kind of dictate what you believe in, and not saying that they do, but you kind of take what, because you look up to them.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think that sucks because I kind of grew up, my parents are Democrats, but they taught me like the Republican views, and they taught me other religions just so that I can choose, because they don't want me to be influenced by them.
Yeah.
Because there's such a big world out there, and they want me to make my own decision. And I think that just kind of sucks that we're so influenced by them, and we're not like taught like about everything else. We're kind of closed-minded to our culture and what our parents believe.
And people tend to go along with the group. That's like part of like the herd mentality. And I suppose I think one of the ideas of education is try to get people out of that mood of thinking. So does this mean necessarily that we're a product of our conditioning? I think you can still talk about influence. So you can say, well, it's still, we're talking about 70, 80%. But then maybe that shows that you still have choice, and maybe this just shows people are lazy, and that people like to be spoon-fed beliefs, or people don't think critically and independently. And maybe the 20 to 30% do, and maybe those are the people that actually form their beliefs through free will, rational choice, and other people just kind of go with the flow, because human beings tend to be kind of lazy and go with what everybody else thinks. Yeah.
Well, I think it's like the same as like nature versus nurture argument. It's a little bit of both. I think it's like either or. You're a product of your environment and like yourself, but also things influence you. So I think it's like both. There's not either or.
Yeah. So questions: why do religions cluster in geographic regions? I'll just put in regions. And then you have parents or brain scans. Predict political beliefs. And maybe we could talk about, maybe it's still people are lazy and sheep-like. But some let's see. But maybe capable of free choice. So maybe what we need is like more education. So in other words, there's this fact about human nature that people tend to go along with the group. They tend to be influenced by their peers. When something new comes up, you kind of look around and say, well, what's everybody else doing? And you want to look like other people, and you want to fit in. And if you're worried about doing things right, you're worried about people judging you. And that's sort of this herd mentality that human beings have. And thinking critically and independently is like really hard work. But maybe more people could think critically, make informed, free, rational choices. If, we might say, educated, exposed to many different points of view. And maybe that's the case, that it seems that in order to make a free will choice, you have to be exposed to a lot of different kinds of information and then make a choice. So maybe if we did that would allow people to make free choices. That's one of the goals of education, right? You expose people to a lot of different ideas, and then they can make an informed choice. And maybe that's really what free will is you're exposed to, say, different cultures, different religions, different ways of doing things, and then you can compare and contrast and say, well, I think this is best, or I think this one's best. Yeah.
But isn't kind of the education system like a byproduct of the environment or like the town or like area that it's in? Because I grew up in a really Republican town, and like the way I was taught like history and religion, even health, like when we got taught sex ed, we did not learn about like protecting yourself and contraception because they didn't believe in it. It was just like, don't have sex till you're married.
Wow.
And it was a public school, like, and it's such a byproduct of that area, and I think that's kind of how all education systems are, even if it's a public school.
Yeah, in general, like the government schools can give you the government line.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, like, I was in government schools quite some time ago, but I remember it's like I was in California, Sacramento, the state capital. Everybody and their brother works for the government, and it was like heavily biased towards Democrats. You know, Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was seen as like the second coming. He was like revered as a god. Johnson's Great Society programs were seen as you know the best thing next to sliced bread. And so there's that bias, and then you think about, well, who's like doing the teaching? Well, it's a bunch of like unionized government workers, right? What kind of view do they have? Same thing with college professors. College professors are a bunch of commies. They're a bunch of socialist pinko commies. Yeah, the present company accepted. Why is that? Well, they're a bunch of like elitist, unionized government workers, and that there's all this sort of cultural thing, and this speaks to your point. Why does somebody go into teaching? They want to change the world. They want to, you know, and there's all these sort of social values. And you look at the number of college professors that, you know, have, I don't know, religious affiliation, it's like really small. And you look at the party, they've done all these studies on party registration. And especially in the social sciences, it's, you know, you look at sociology and, what's the other one? Psychology and political science, or sociology and anthropology. You're looking at like 80% of the people are like registered Democrat, or there's some third party, they're like Green, or they're, you know, Communist Party USA, or Peace and Freedom, or something like that. So like really like on the far radical left. And you look on their issues, all the social issues and the economic issues, and they're like, you compare them to the rest of the country, they're like way over on one side. And so this is why when people go to college, they tend to come out with more, you know, liberal or progressive views. But you know, growing up, can I ask where you grew up, like that went to school?
In Alaska.
Alaska, okay, yeah, so it tends to be more Republican. And same thing if you grew up like in Texas, you know, like certain parts of Texas or Orange County, you'd have like a certain line on things. Or like rural Georgia or something like that. Whereas if you grew up in New York City, you'd be putting the condom on the banana and, you know, all the whole thing, and you'd be reading Heather Has Two Mommies and the whole opposite thing. So then the thing is like, where's the objective view? Because you're going to be molded by those early experiences. Let's see, it was a comment or question? Yeah.
So I find kind of interesting, because you said that people come to university and be a little bit more liberal, and just out of personal experience, people that are in my political science classes, like, they usually come in with a pretty like liberal mindset, and after 2 or 3 years of just having this very, very liberal agenda drilled into you, a lot of people switch. Like, a lot of people flip over to a conservative side. So I think that's just kind of an interesting phenomenon that happens when people are exposed to an extreme amount of what they believe. Like, they might
and you follow through. Sometimes there's even a life cycle. Like people, they tend to start out when they're young, more idealistic. They tend to be more liberal, and then they like get their first job and they see how much goes to taxes, and maybe they're part of some big organization. They see how like inefficient it is. Particularly, you get a job working for the government, and then you're like, oh, this is awful. And then as people, start amassing assets and trying to make their way in the world, they're like, oh, the government's not all it's cracked up to be, and so they tend to become more conservative. And then often when they get like near retirement age, they flip and become socialists again. So I don't know. It is kind of interesting though. But you think about then where's like the free will? Why is it that people again generally start out more liberal and become more conservative? And if these are like free will choices, what does that mean? Why should it be determined by how old you are? Like, okay, here's another example. Like all these opinion polls. These opinion polls are really good at predicting what's going to happen in the next election, and they make these things based on your race, on your ethnicity, on your gender, on your age, and by looking at and maybe on like what part of the country you're from, and they can take this demographic data based on those factors about you, and figure out how you're going to vote. Now, for any given individual, it's not very accurate, but looking at like large groups of individuals, they're really good at it, and trying to figure out what who are people going to vote for. But it seems like you shouldn't be able to predict who's going to win the election if everybody's making a free choice, casting a vote based on a free will decision, right? If it's free will, it means you can't predict it. If it's free, it should be. There's nothing making it turn out that way, and so you shouldn't be able to look at at this data and predict what somebody's going to do. Like imagine I don't know, we're arguing about free will, and you say, I just know I have free will. I know I'm free, and I said, okay, I'm just to pull out the big guns and show you they're wrong. And you're like, and you say, okay, okay, prove me wrong, and then maybe you reach into your bag, and I say, you're pulling out breath mint, right? And you look, and that's exactly what you're doing. And you pull out the breath mint. I say, and now you're gonna you're gonna put it back because you're like, oh, I'm confirming Bardell's the thing, right? And suppose I say, I predict all the things you're going to do during the day. Now, if I tell you those, it's going to affect you. Imagine though, maybe you get home and there's an envelope waiting for you in the mailbox, and it details all the things you've just done. And there's no way that letter, and the letter is sealed, right? Maybe it's even got a postmark from yesterday on it. And it tells you everything that's happened. So this letter was written before your entire day, and it tells you all the things you were going to do. It seems like then you think, okay, well, if every single thing I did that day is predicted, it can't really be free. And this actually gets to this theological determinism thing. Maybe I should hit that next. We have to talk about the psychoanalytic thing too. Let's just jump to the psychoanalytic thing. But it seems like I'll just put polls. Yeah, polls. Polls predict supposed, free choices at the ballot box. Based on demographic data. And I just think the libertarians' view on this is just going to say, well, again, you're dealing with big groups of people, you're dealing with influence and guesses based on what people tend to do, and you're dealing with influences, you're not dealing with determination. So that's kind of the line of the libertarian, is that that influence and predisposition doesn't mean necessity. It just means you're inclined to act a certain way, but it doesn't mean that you have to act that way or behave that way. Psychoanalytic argument. Psychoanalytic. For determinism. So this comes from Freud, Sigmund Freud, who really the first person to really develop a theory of the unconscious mind. So there's a part of your mind, the unconscious mind, that deals with a lot of your day-to-day things and holds these kind of enduring attitudes or beliefs about the world, and is unconscious. The unconscious is, or the subconscious. Either one will do. The unconscious mind is really what's calling the shots. And what's in your unconscious mind is a result of your experience. And particularly of early childhood experience, where you don't really have the ability to make free choices. So the idea Freud has, like around by the age of 5, your unconscious mind's pretty much fully developed. And so, and it's full of all kinds of stuff, often irrational, that drives your behavior. So a person comes into therapy and they say, suppose as a young woman, they say, "Doc, I don't know what's going on, but every relationship I have fails. I pick these lousy men, and they end up drinking and cheating on me, and then leaving me for another woman. And sometimes they beat me, and it happens over and over and over again. I used to think I was just cursed by being born under a bad sign, or that my stars weren't right, and or sometimes, and then I used to think it was just bad luck. But how can bad luck happen over and over and over again? I thought I was cursed." And then my friend said, "I ought to go see a shrink and see what's what." So here I am. Right? So what do you think the psychologist might say? What do you think might be the result of therapy? Maybe after, I don't know, a few months of sessions.
The guy's broke.
What's that? Oh, the woman's broke. Yeah, I suppose that's one result. Well, you know, like what, I don't know. You ever listen to those call-in shows or whatever, or your pop psychology vet? What would probably happen is the psychologist would say, "Well, let's look at your childhood. Tell me about your father." "Oh, well, Dad was never around. He was a traveling salesman, and then he'd come home, and I just remember he'd drink like crazy. And sometimes he'd fly into a rage and he'd beat us kids, and we'd hide in the closet, And my older sister, who would protect us, she's like a nightclub singer, and she is really attractive, and she has these men that buy her cars and jewelry and stuff, and seems to do really well. And my other sister, she's lives alone and has never been on a date ever, as far as I know. Maybe she's a lesbian. And me, I just have these bad relationships with men that beat and abuse me." And psychologists might say, "Well, let me tell you about the unconscious mind. So if you have a parent who's supposed to be nurturing and loving and so on, and they're not there, and when they are there, they're violent, abusive, and unpredictable, your unconscious mind is this funny thing. It says, well, my father, who's supposed to love me and be there for me and is like a god to me, is this terrible tyrannical figure, and he never loved me. And so, but I really want my father to love me, so I'm going to find somebody just like my dad and get him to love me, and that's going to be good. That's going to be the same thing. So if I can find somebody just like my dad who will love me, then I will be loved by my father, and that will be great." Now, the psychologist would say, now consciously you're totally unaware of this, but that's what's going on deep down in your mind. And if we were to hypnotize you, all this stuff would probably come out. And that's like generally what happens. You have people with problematic relationships where they seem to seek out people who are abusive. And this tends to be like a women problem, a problem that women have, of seeking out violent and abusive partners. And it's because they had a violent or abusive or absent father, and so they look for a father figure. And this is like a known thing. So now the question is, do you really have a choice over who you date? Right? So if it's based on all this stuff in your unconscious mind that you have no clue what's going on there, and it happened when you're too young to even remember it. And the psychoanalytic argument is that that's not just true for like neurotic people with problem relationships. It's true about everything, and even the positive things, right? So why is somebody like a successful businessman, and why is he full of the self-confidence? Why? And it might be that maybe there's some little league game, right? And it's it's the bottom of the 8th inning, and bases are loaded. And he's at bat, and the whole game relies on whether he's going to hit the ball or not. And maybe his dad's there, and his dad's the coach of the team, and he puts his hand on his shoulder and says, "You can do it, son. You can do anything," right? And he hits a home run, and he's like the hero for the day, right? And that's maybe sets the course for the rest of his life, because down rooted in his subconscious mind is, you're a winner. You can do anything, right? And now, he might even forgot about that game. Maybe occasionally he remembers it, but that might be part of his unconscious mind. It's like every time he wakes up in the morning, or he has some challenging business deal or problem, it's like this little voice inside says, "You can do anything. Don't pay attention to these obstacles. You'll find some way out of it. You're a winner. You're always going to win." Right? So it could be positive things too. It's just that the neurotic things are easier to kind of pick up, because it's kind of neurotic behaviors, it shows it's a symptom that something's wrong, and you figure, well, why am I doing this irrational thing? Well, it's the unconscious mind. But there could be, there's positive things there too. So thoughts about this, about the influence of the unconscious. If the unconscious is calling the shots, where's your free will? Any thoughts?
They're all unconscious, so I can't.
They're all unconscious thoughts. So this is like you talk about there's neurotic behavior is one proof of the unconscious, and then there's hypnosis. Hypnosis is really interesting. You can actually feel your own subconscious mind at work. I don't know if I mentioned this before. You sort of, you can hypnotize yourself. Just sort of like sit in a chair and relax, and like put your hand out on the desk or on the armchair, and imagine a string tied to your finger, and a giant hot air balloon soaring up to the sky and pulling your finger skyward. And if you just picture that, first your finger will start to twitch a little bit, and then it'll move up, and depending on how suggestible you are, in maybe 5 or 10 minutes, your arm will start to move, seemingly of its own accord. And that's your unconscious mind. And I'm making a demonstration here. Why aren't we showing me on the screen here? I'm looking at neurotic behavior and hypnosis. Anyway, you'll feel your arm it'll just like moving on its own. And it's different from like moving your arm up and down. All you're doing is picturing something in your mind. And if you picture it vividly enough, there goes your arm up in the air. Some people, it takes like 2 minutes and their arm goes like up like this. And those are the guys like the stage hypnotists make, walk like a chicken, or, bark like a dog and crawl around the ground and so on and so forth, right? So these are two proofs that the subconscious mind exists. So you have people doing things like the woman, right? And you probably know somebody like this, right? Somebody who has like a long string of broken relationships. And okay, now there's a chance, maybe you're like hanging out with some friends, and there's this guy who's like, I don't know, he's an engineering student, he's smart, he's funny, he's attractive, right? and he's he's got a thing for this girl, right? And who's she interested in? Well, it's like the gangbanger, that who's over there ignoring her, and she's like, oh, that guy, I really have the hots for him. This guy's he's kind of boring, right? And so there's this attraction to like the sort of the person, the social deviant, or the person with lots of problems that she's going to fix, right? So you think after like 3 or 4 times around the block with the guy that she's going to fix, with the substance abuse problems and the criminal behavior and the violent outbursts and so on, that she'd learn from experience. And that she'd say, okay, I'm going to stay away from guys like that and pick a guy who's more functional. But no, she keeps on going back to those bad boys. And the question is, why is that, right? Well, it's something she needs to work out in therapy. It's that thing in her subconscious that says, find someone like your alcoholic, abusive father to love you, and then your father will love you. And her father might be long dead and gone, or disappeared, right? But there's still that thing in the unconscious mind driving her behavior. And so it is with all our behavior, according to the Freudians. Now, one argument against this is that, well, maybe people are screwed up, like people with, busted up relationships and problems, people that like have hand washing compulsions and extreme phobias. Maybe they're not free, so maybe I'll just say you could have freedom in other areas, right? So maybe she doesn't have a choice about her relationships, but maybe she has freedom in regard to her career, right? Or all the other choices she makes. Maybe the guy with the hand washing compulsion doesn't have a choice about whether he's going to wash his hands 100 times a day, but maybe his dating life is just fine. He's fine and willing to put up with his OCD, right? Or so it's the idea is that neurotic behavior and these subconscious things, they might muck up people's lives, and maybe they can affect them positively. And even though it influences our behavior, it doesn't mean that everything you do is a result of some childhood trauma or some maybe a positive thing too, right? I use the example in the text, why do I love Apple products? Well, maybe it's just because like the school subsidizes them, and I like the way the operating system works. It's just a practical choice that has nothing to do with childhood trauma or early experiences or my unconscious mind. To just make simple means ends decisions, and maybe most of our decisions are like that. Okay, I think we're running out of time. We're going to finish up free will on Tuesday and then review for the exam.